if you've had the luxury of just being able to sit still in the woods one day, and watch something like a deer or an elk in the wintertime when they don't have leaves, they eat bark.
Yeah.
And they'll walk up to a tree and bend down and bite into the bark, and then they just snap their head up and they tear about a 2-foot strip.
Yeah.
And they'll start chewing it and kind of take a couple of steps, and they're chewing this bark, and by the time they finish that, they might step over there, and then they bite into another tree and tear a strip off. So when I'm harvesting aspen bark, that's what I like to do too.
Welcome to the Light Cellar Podcast, brought to you by Light Cellar, a place where you can learn to find and craft your own food and medicine. In this interview series, you will meet a range of characters in the health and wellness space that are bringing light to your everyday. You'll hear from a number of different experts on a wide variety of topics. We have several different series within the podcast, including our Wild Wisdom and Storytelling with Blaine and Andrusek, the Rays of Light, inspiring wellness in the community, plus solo casts, Q&As, and other topics for you to enjoy. You can find this as a video version, as well as the audio on any of your favorite platforms. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this with somebody you know who will benefit. You can also shop online at lightcellar.ca.
Hi, we're back.
All right. Hello. Welcome. Another episode of Wild Wisdom and Herbal Storytelling.
And I don't know about you, but it's just finally hitting me. Like, I had a yard tiny compared to Malcolm's, but this is the time of year that you walk around the garden and you're so happy to see all the little species coming back, and it's spring. And I was kind of missing that. In the care home, that's not part of my life anymore. And it just sort of hit me in the last couple of days that I've been waking up to light.
Yeah.
It just kind of hit me. It's spring.
Yeah.
It's not winter anymore. It's not dark.
No, for sure.
In the morning. And there's certain plants that we would harvest in the spring. So that got me thinking about what we might run with today.
Yeah, totally. It's actually kind of hard to keep up with. Like, I've been, aware of all the spring plants coming up. I'm doing my foraging forecast, giving people a heads up of what's popping, what you can harvest, and spring. It's just abundance. There's such a diversity every day. And I was away for a few days, I was mentioning to you, and then I come back and I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, spruce pollen is out and this is happening. And a lot changes in a short amount of time. And, especially amplified, I assume most people, it's been a little bit cool, it's been a little bit overcast and definitely rainy. Not ideal for harvesting, but most people tend to stay inside, so that can kind of accentuate it as well, right? These plants get the water and just like poof. You're right. It's such a delight to have a yard, or even if you don't, any sort of natural space to get out into.
Go for a walk.
Yeah, and just see that shift, that evolution of the season and how the plants are responding.
I had so many weird species in my front yard that there'd be gardener-type people often standing in front of my house just pointing at things and go, well, what's that one?
Right, yeah.
If I wasn't around to have a chat with them, they would leave in mystery.
Yeah, like off the top of your head, what would you guess? What was the number of different species you'd have in your yard? Like a dozen, 2 dozen?
Oh...
And I know 12 is way too low. So.
Oh no! I mean, it was just a 25-foot wide yard, right? And I used to call it my 25-foot farm.
Right. Yeah.
Because and people would say, "Hey, wouldn't you like to have a place like Terry's so that you could, grow a whole bunch?" And I, absolutely not.
Right.
I have enough trouble taking care of 25 feet.
Right. Let alone 25 acres or whatever he had. Yeah.
So it's Yeah.
Yeah, you can get a lot in a place, and like similar to mine. Like I like to have at least one token species, or two of a variety of something, just to kind of like nice little placement, a nice little honoring, a way to connect with it, and yeah,
I've got to go back to your question. Just in the front yard there, which would have been just 25 foot square roughly, I would have had 25 species there.
right, yeah,
Because I had 3 kinds of orchids.
oh yeah,
There was all the little people
yeah,
and the shrubs. And I don't want to think about this too hard because I'll get sad. But I had so many trees in that yard, and they were all native trees from my boreal forest, which I miss here. So I had all of my, like a paper birch,
yeah,
and chokecherry, aspen. The birch was a fun one, and most of these were things that came home in a shirt pocket.
right, yeah. I was
You
going
know?
to ask, did you
I was
bring them back from the wild?
Some of it is stuff that, of course, I make it up in my head, and some of my plant spirit connection stuff is real in my mind, or some of it is me wanting it to be real. But we were coming back from a day's fishing, and when you start learning more about wild plants, usually it's flowers that catch your eye because they're colorful.
Right.
And then
Or it's berries,
you
because they're
might-
tasty.
well, yeah, but it's the flowers are when you get out a book,
Right, it's true.
and then but so you identify it from the flowers, but that's when you want to really look at the leaves, because flowers are usually around for a short time,
Yeah.
and there's only a few that we harvest, other than for flower essence work. But leaves and roots and things are what we want, and so many flower books. You might have a Wild Flowers of Alberta book, but it may even be not labeled correctly, but it's labeled, and here's these big flower pictures, and the flower stems have come up through 3 other species of plants,
Right.
and its own leaves aren't even in the picture.
Right.
So for ID work,
Yeah,
those are bad pictures.
yeah,
And as a photographer, for the things I wanted them for, that was a critical part of what I had to harvest, was good leaf shots,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So sometimes I would even pick one up if it was okay to, and have somebody else hold it or whatever in front of out of focus background,
Right.
so that you could see the leaves by themselves and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'd go about 25.
Yeah,
And I got off topic there. So one day, here's the thing: you go from identifying flowers to identifying leaves, and if you're smart, you're looking around, thinking, where does this one like to live? Who are its neighbors? Because if I ever want to find some, I got to know the neighborhood.
yeah,
And then you end up getting to a point where you'll recognize plants at 25 miles an hour.
right. Yeah, totally.
Like you'll realize that you just saw something go by in the side of your head, and was that balsam root?
Right.
Like if you're down,
Yeah.
in the south of the province, and you kind of stop and go back, wow.
Yeah.
And balsam root's got a lot of rosin in it, and the root is about as big as my forearm.
Right.
Like there's something to harvest there.
Yeah.
And you get whole hillsides covered with it.
Right.
So it doesn't hurt my feelings to take, we have this old thing, we call it the 1 in 20 rule. If there isn't at least 20 of something, don't you dare take any.
Right. Yeah.
So if there's 20, you can take one. But if there's 2,000, we'll have at it.
Yeah, totally.
Especially you kind of look around and you realize the whole hillside's covered with it, then
Yeah.
have at it, right?
I like that strategy about the neighborhood too, because I use that very often as well. You're driving along, you're like, okay, Aspen stand, right? Like, I bet you maybe we can find some cow parsnip in there, or something like you wouldn't see it necessarily driving from the
Right.
road, but
Yeah.
using the other species that are in the area.
Yeah.
It's your way to kind of dial it in.
Because at times you're 20 miles of exactly the same 8 species. Right?
Right. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's 184 wood lilies in bloom.
Yeah.
Well, I got to stop and eat a couple. You know, that's my favorite vegetable, right, in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
I remember when I had quite a nice article in Canadian Geographic years ago, and one of the articles, letters to the editor, was condemning me for, we used to have these wood lilies, which is Saskatchewan's provincial flower, right? We used to have wood lilies all over this area where my family's farm is, and there's just none around anymore. And Blaine's talking about making fritters with them,
Right.
and things like that. Like, this
Yeah.
is really, really bad. And then my response is, well, yes, they're all gone now because of something called farming.
Right.
You guys ground them into the ground to grow wheat.
Yeah.
That's why there's none around anymore. Don't blame me for the odd pinch.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Or logging, where we've clear cut,
Yeah.
wood, lily. Actually, I learned an interesting statistic that there's, on our last episode, we were talking about some of the planned logging in the Kananaskis area. Apparently, don't look into this, but it came from a reputable source, that there's never been a second harvest from a forest in Kananaskis. Like, essentially what they're saying is that the replants aren't successful. It's in BC, right? From old growth to second growth, third growth, like they replant, like they just grow those trees. And here on kind of the east side of the Rockies, it's just not an environment where they thrive. Like it takes so long for them to regrow to size to harvest again.
Well, my first guess would be back to your territory, that there's probably a mycelium or something missing.
That's right. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, and I often think about that too. Like even just a little hillside over here, they'll plant some spruce, they'll plant some pine or larch or whatever, and even just over here, it wasn't that long ago. Like planted 4 little larch. There's 2.5 of them that are still alive, and if you think about it, right, it's just kind of stuck in the middle of some grass. Yeah, it's not an ecosystem.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're driving home from fishing, and I noticed this little boggy-woggy area, and I'm not driving, my brother is, but I noticed a couple of pink and purple spots over there at the edge of the pond. And I remembered that on a shot list I needed photographs, so I was kind of like a bounty hunter, right? I got a shot list. Every plant on the list is going to pay me something.
Yeah.
So I came back the next morning with my cameras, and I can remember it was a bit miserable because there was some sphagnum. It was deep muskegee, and I ended up sort of crotch deep, getting eaten by mosquitoes and black flies to get those pictures I wanted of the bog rosemary is one of them.
Okay, yeah.
And I got the shots I wanted. But as I came back up to the truck, I was putting things away, and I looked down, and there was a little paper birch tree about this tall.
Oh, nice.
It had 7 leaves on it, as I remember, and I could see how somebody dragging a trailer, it's a fairly narrow gravel road, somebody dragging a boat trailer had pulled over a bit just to let somebody else by. And the tire tracks were about this far from that little birch tree. And the birch tree must have sensed that I'm special. Mm-hmm. And I had some plant energy or something.
Yeah.
And I looked at it. I kind of went, oh, that was close. And this little birch tree said, "Mister, could you save me? I'm going to get hit by a truck." And I just kind of smiled and went, sure. And it was so sandy that I was able to just wiggle it out of the soil there gently.
Yeah.
And I took some paper towel and moistened it and just gently folded it over the little birch tree and put it in my shirt pocket. And when I got back to the cabin, I gave it a little more room.
Yeah.
But it came home to Calgary with me in a Ziploc bag,
No way.
and it's 3 stories high now.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I
that's
have to
great.
leave that behind. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds similar to this home, actually. The original owners, they had 2 nice big birch trees in the front yard that they had similar story brought from the wild. Yeah, they lived out a nice, good, full, long life. And yeah, we love those things. But yeah, they did succumb. So we took them down, used the wood for fire. And yeah, have planted other things. We brought several things actually back from the wild. The strawberry, what a great little ground cover. I mean, it's really taken off this
Yep.
year. So we're going to have lots of wild strawberries. We'll see what we get in terms of fruit. But regardless, like what an incredible ground cover to have.
And for now, you want to let it just do well and spread.
Yeah.
But strawberry leaves are about the highest source of vitamin C there is.
That's amazing. I always
So-
remember learning that from you. And yeah, it's shocking.
If it takes over, kind of thing,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to pick some in your salads.
Yeah, totally. And then I've also read that the runners are good for menopause. Like those red little runners that they put out. Yeah, don't have any personal experience with that, but
Neither do I.
no. So, and the thing that's curious about me with the strawberry leaf is like, typically when you taste things that are high in vitamin C, let's just take orange, citrus, right? It's like that ascorbic acid. It's sour.
Yeah.
I don't get that taste with strawberry leaf.
I've never tried them.
Yeah, I mean, parsley I know contains vitamin C. I don't get a strong ascorbic acid sour flavor from that either. So obviously it's not the rule, in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, strawberry leaf, great in tea. Not sure about kind of eating it as a vegetable. Maybe when it's young, you can throw it into salads, that kind of thing. But I've definitely seen it in tea blends, and yeah, most people are more after the fruits for sure.
So an episode or so ago, we were talking about intestinal parasites. And, again, we cover so many topics that we could spend a week on, right? And we have these brief minutes together with you folks out there. But I remember thinking about, I had a few photographs that I wanted to show.
Some scary photos.
Talking about tapeworms and things, and I would have mentioned perhaps that tapeworms grow in sections exactly, not a little bit, exactly like a Christmas cactus. They come, it's a little rectangular section, and then a little bump appears, and it starts growing. And it slowly opens up and it forms another little bump. And
Yeah, and it's got those like barbs on the side.
yeah, and so I wanted you to see these hooks here. There you go. Those are like grappling hooks, right?
Yeah.
So that's how a tapeworm attaches itself to your intestinal wall, and then just sits there and eats and poops.
Yeah.
And
Taking your nutrients.
and then this other one here, come in again.
Yeah.
This is a roundworm.
Okay, up on the top.
I wanted that with the barbs on it again.
Yeah.
That almost looks like the way they mine potash. When you got these 9-foot drills that they use to go wah, 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 when they're mining potash
Yeah.
outside of Saskatoon. And then that other one there would be, that's probably a scarus. That's a roundworm. That's the one that people are afraid of from pork. And it gets up to about maybe 9 inches and about as big as a pencil wide. And, it just upsets me that because of the fear over that worm, that people cook the crap out of pork.
Right.
And like all it takes to kill a scarus is 165 degrees for 20 seconds. So you can have a nice, medium well done, thick pork loin piece, or a pork roast. Doesn't have to be cooked until it's like,
Yeah.
just dry and hard and no flavor and that sort of thing. So I kind of tease people about, if that's how you have to cook meat, please become a vegetarian. Because it's sort of an embarrassment, right?
Yeah.
And this is another roundworm here. This is a headshot. So you just think about something, that's that ugly living in your gut.
Yeah, and actually you brought this other sheet of paper, which I just noticed a little clip from. It says, studies indicate that over 85% of North Americans have parasites.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we all do.
Yeah, so that's an underestimation. Yeah.
And, but different kinds. There's a lot of them that just don't do any harm.
Totally.
As long as they don't get so many that they're robbing you of nutrients.
Yeah.
Like pinworms are about a centimeter long, tiny little, as thick as is it vermicelli?
Yeah.
That's just like angel hair pasta.
Yeah.
That's what they look like. And as long as they're not overpopulated and robbing you of nutrients, and then especially like if you take a bunch of supplements, you're really feeding your pets first.
Right.
So then you've got like really, really healthy parasites.
Yeah.
It's just really odd. But I used to think, if all you eat is processed food, you're less likely to get parasites.
Yeah, I guess so. Hey, yeah. From
But
a food source.
if you eat closer to the land, which I would prefer,
Yeah.
for me, and the reason I used to do a parasite cleanse once a year when I was younger, and always paddling and kayaking, kayaks, living up the Churchill River and La Ronge and that part of Saskatchewan. There's a lot of lakes and whatnot where I would never hesitate to dip a cup and drink lake water. And so I thought fall would probably be a good time for me to do a parasite cleanse.
Right.
Once a year or every second year. And I don't, especially now that I've seen electron microscope photographs of something like a basil leaf. I had some basil growing in my room recently, and somebody has to come in and rub it and say, oh, is this basil? Don't do that! Because what's on the bottom of the leaves are little round balls
Right.
full of essential oil.
Yeah.
And if you rub the leaf like that, yes, you can smell it now. But you've just smeared basil oil all over the leaf.
Right.
And it's going to be black by the end of the day.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's allergic to its own oils.
Oh.
That's why it keeps the oils in those little bags.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Right? And so that's why I like to buy basil in some of the Chinese stores where there's some guy in the back room probably just using his lips, taking little bags, puts the basil in there, goes and spins the bag around, puts a twist tie on it,
Right.
and they're in these little air bubbles that you can throw in your cart
Yeah.
and throw them in your fridge drawer or whatever when you get home, and the basil's good for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But when you buy basil or a lot of other aromatic herbs in those little styrofoam trays, shrink wrapped,
Right.
throw them in the cart, you're lucky if you get a couple days out of those,
Yeah.
because the leaves all turn black. So I got stung by a wasp. I put 1 drop of pure basil on it. 1. Not 14. 1 drop on the sting. Works fine. But if you're going to use basil for something else and do a whole arm, you have to dilute it down to, say, 3 to 5%,
Right.
or whatever, or you're going to burn your skin.
Yeah. It's super
Right?
strong.
So, yeah, when we look, you get close-up looks. I just love watching things. I'm mesmerized at times watching the Nature Channel. I love watching
Yeah.
a lot of things on PBS, and just the photography that they have now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I just,
And a lot of those things they've spent weeks, if not months, setting up for that perfect shot as well.
where they must have somehow drilled a hole in a nest so that they're,
Right.
you're actually watching births
Yeah.
of little birds and things like that. And
Yeah.
how are they getting the light in there with
Yeah.
LED cords that you
Right.
can get now?
Yeah.
It's just like, as a retired commercial photographer, it just boggles my head.
Yeah.
How they're doing all this photography now. Anyway, that
Yeah.
was a sidebar. So,
Well, let's just jump here real quick. Kind of ties in culinary herbs like basil,
Yep.
and also what we're talking about in terms of the garden. So this is something I found, and we're assuming, I'm going to guess, this came from your collection. As you were kind of transitioning from your home to the home, the care home, there were a number of things still kind of kicking around. So I had received this, and it was been sitting on my shelf, and then it was Angela the other day. She's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Let's see." So first we opened it up, and it was like, wow, okay, that's not a tincture. That definitely smells like vinegar. And then it came next down to identifying the plant, and I thought, okay, well, it's either an Artemisia or something else. And so, I brought this to you to see if you could recognize
and
it.
I was really bad for not labeling things.
Yeah, I know, me and you too. So that's why I was like, was this Blaine's or is this mine? Because I'm exactly the same. Yeah.
And my first response, looking at all of the seeds,
Yeah.
or I guess those are
Like flower heads.
flower heads. But the leaves are kind of long, rather the shape of willow leaves. And what was the first thing I said was it might be tarragon.
Yeah.
And then I had a little taste, and I had to slowly, it's been a while, right? And I had to start remembering that for many years, I don't know why I never thought of this sooner, I used to use a fondue fork to stuff wine bottles with tarragon and then fill them with vinegar. And then it finally occurred to me that if you do it in 4-liter jugs like this, now you can just put I would use those coffee filters that come in a cone shape. You can put that in a funnel, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then just put that over here and turn the whole thing upside down
Right.
to let it drain into another jar.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would even press that. I would just let it drain.
Yeah.
And then you could use that press that you got from me as well.
Yeah.
You could press it off. And something I don't know if we talked about was that with that press, did we talk about the cheesecloth?
We've been using cheesecloth. Yeah.
Yeah. So that you don't make a mess of
Right.
the tube.
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
hose.
Yeah.
But I would either drain or press that off, and then just fill the wine bottles. Or it's nice to do something showy with gifts. So ideally for storage, you should still use dark bottles, but they're so pretty.
Yeah.
As gifts, use clear. Some wine bottles or other bottles that size are clear glass. And then you might just put a sprig of whatever you've done. I've done rosemary that way. I used to... Oh, now that I think about it, yes, it's definitely tarragon.
All right.
Because I'd have a bunch of these in the basement.
Yeah.
In boxes in the dark, right, it's to age. And then for my class at the end of the summer, we would drain that off so it was already usable.
Right.
And then my students got to walk around. Did we die?
No, we're good. We still got.
My students would walk around the yard picking whatever they wanted to decorate it with.
Oh, okay.
A sprig of rosemary,
Right.
some flowers,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And then that was a nice little gift. And whatever they added would give it additional flavors, right?
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, that's good. I'll press that off and do something with it. So, yeah, that's a few years old, that one there. But
Doesn't matter.
yeah, it doesn't matter. That's it, right? With like vinegar, alcohol, these kinds of things, it's
And
great.
it's been in the dark too, right?
Yeah.
In a box.
Yeah, totally. Now, when I started looking up pictures of tarragon, and you had mentioned it specifically, it was Russian tarragon. And what was interesting, it brought up, mugwort and some of the other Artemisias as well, like in the same kind of images selection. And because that was my other guess. So is there a connection there? They just kind of look similar, or is there anything that goes deeper between, tarragon and some of the Artemisias?
Well, mugwort
Yeah.
is the one the Chinese call moxa,
Right. Yeah.
and they tie it up in little bundles for moxibustion, to burn it. And there's certain, this is funny. I had either a student or a client over one day, and she was getting near term with her pregnancy and had some issues with the baby rolling a certain way that was causing her pain.
Yeah.
And you hear about breached births where the baby's sideways and can't come out.
Yeah.
And she had heard something about using moxibustion. And I said, I know exactly who to call. And this is when Cindy Wu was still working at Wild Rose before she got her own clinic. So I called the clinic and I said, Cindy, I got this mother here, the baby's breaching and she's in some pain. And she said, and her husband just left with the car and I can't, there was some reason I couldn't drive. She said, you could come to clinic right now, Blaine. And I said, no, I can't leave, somebody else is coming here.
Right.
And she said, well, she said, and I said, but I have moxa. And she, you have moxa? And I said, oh, yes, and I have the bot stuff, but I have moxa. I grow it, too. She said, you grow moxa? She was all amazed.
Yeah.
So we got past that, and she couldn't find the English words to explain that it was at the bottom. No, not the bottom. No, the acupuncture meridian is at the side of the bottom of the little toenail. She just couldn't get the words out to express that. So that's where you bring up the moxa, is right there on the toe, on the little toe.
Curious.
And I just laid her down on a bench, or just out on the front porch, and we were all, there was probably one of my helpers, somebody else there. I think there was 4 of us there, and I just held it there for a while, and we all stood in awe of watching that baby roll over.
No way.
You know, and it was just this incredible thing that it was like learning a new trick over the phone. Right. So anyway, yes, I had one moxa growing in the front yard. I don't know who would have got that. It was purple.
Okay.
Looked just like a fairly big bush, but purple.
Right. Nice.
But the mugwort had to do with, and you've brought up this alehouse thing.
Right. Yeah.
So mugwort was one of the ones, like absinthe, that depending on the dosage, you could get a bit heady with it.
Right. Yeah.
So it was good for the mug.
Ah.
So if you were having an especially bad day, your bartender, ale keeper, whoever there, would wrap up a bunch of moxa in your, I want to say mug, but there's another word.
Right. Your
Stein.
right. Your big glass.
He'd wrap up the herb in there, and you'd fill it with ale, and just kind of sip your ale, but there'd be enough alcohol in your beer to suck some of the chemicals out of the
right
mug wort. So it was good for the mug.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, I think we have, from memory, check it out in Bud's Flora, but we have something like, I think it's 28 species of Artemisia that grow in Alberta.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool.
And the ones that we mostly, like I would have used over the years, my big one would be Frigida,
Right.
which is the one that grows all over, like, south-facing slopes, like anywhere along the Bow River where you've got south-facing slopes, there's going to be Artemisia frigida growing there. Out in dry pastures, it has quite finely dissected leaves, kind of like yarrow.
Yeah, I almost envision like Frigida and like frayed, you know, like it just has this kind of wispy frayedness to its, the leaves.
And then Ludoviciana is the one that grows. Oh, and Frigida usually grows in a perennial, just from one root. It'll be a clump.
Yeah.
Sometimes hard to move because the soil is so rocky. But depending on where you are, you could get a whole clump with one shovel.
Right.
Just depending on the soil. You might have to dig around and pick at it or whatever. But Ludoviciana will grow by itself.
Okay.
But you'll get whole ditches full of it.
Right.
So it grows about 3 feet high and has a bit willowish looking leaves. They're
a little bit wider.
Lanceolate kind of thing. No, that's the wrong word. Long and narrow.
Yeah.
Parallel sided with a point on it. Anyway, leaves about this long and about 4 feet high. And I have talked to so many indigenous people from different tribes that will say everybody's got a different story.
Yeah.
That's the ladies, or don't use this for that. No, that's the ladies, or use, no, this is the one for the worms. No, and this, I get so many different versions of the stories. I'm sure if you went from coast to coast, you could probably do a 400-page book on just Artemisias.
Yeah.
With, the different versions of the stories.
Yeah.
So when it comes to parasites and cleansing, like smudging for protection, I've always been a Frigida guy. So the only reason I brought this was that I see people who they'll call it tying up smudge, and they just sort of toss some string around it, and it starts burning, and it falls apart.
Yeah.
There's stuff falling all over the place. And, so it's not right and wrong. I'm just sharing my way. I'm hearing Frank Sinatra in the background. So when I go out gathering Frigida, you don't need pruners. You can just use your thumbnail because it's so brittle.
Yeah.
Typically that they'll just break.
Yeah.
And it's so dry and brittle that it amazes me that if you, just being so dry and brittle, you couldn't get something this tight. But if you leave them somewhere in a box and lay plastic over it. You don't want to forget about it for 10 days. It might get so moist it's going to go moldy on you. But a day or two, just check on it. Enough moisture is going to come out of the plant somehow.
Yeah.
That it gets damp, and the stems are soft.
Right.
Right? And something that I first learned about using string and rope and such was putting up teepees.
Oh, okay.
We would always use, like, I think I couldn't do it spiritually to put up a teepee with nylon rope.
Right.
Like, you got to buy some cotton or
Right.
sisal rope, right?
Yeah.
So you get the big rope that when you lay the poles out and you lash the poles together, and then you've got one is at the door and the other two at the back. Or you're going to have, we start with the tripod. You've got two on the back wall, because the back wall and the front wall are different lengths.
Okay.
A lot of people think teepees are cones, and they aren't. The back wall is steeper, and the front wall, I'm exaggerating here, is sloping, because the front, the door is always facing southeast.
Right.
In our part of the world, because that's got to do with how the smoke flaps are going to work and stuff. But the opening, your smoke hole, when you've done all of this correct, and it's another thing that's incredible about waking up in a teepee, is that the shape of your smoke flap hole is an open vagina.
Right.
It's the first view you had of life.
Oh, interesting.
So every morning you wake up in a teepee is like being born again.
Born again.
So anyway, because of the pitch, most of our weather comes in from the northwest. So if it's going to rain, it's going to come down, or snow, most of it's going to come down here, and it's going to land in the doorway.
Right.
Right? Instead of on your bed, which is always on the back wall. So the back wall's a bit short. Anyway, when you're putting a teepee up, you soak your rope overnight first, so that when you tie up the tripod, or originally, first it's a bipod, so it's the only time, unless you had a well-trained horse or whatever, it's a bit tough to put up a teepee yourself. Easy to have another person. So I'm gonna just start walking back, pulling on the bipod, and then you're gonna come over and swing one of the poles around so that it's a tripod.
Right.
And now that rope's hanging there. And because you soaked it overnight, it's going to dry and tighten that knot. Right?
Right.
Anyway, so I'm big on letting the sage get just a little bit damp, is even too strong of a word, just a little bit moist.
Yeah.
And then the string as well, you can just soak, soup bowl for a while when you get ready to do this. And you're going to select a bunch of stalks. And I see that this one has a bit of sweetgrass in it.
Oh, interesting.
Almost like it's sticking out the top.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit like a Bismarck, like some jelly in the donut. So you get everything together. And rather than just wrap string around and around and around, I like to at least every second, this is knotted here. It's knotted here, and it's knotted here, and it's knotted here, and it's knotted here, and it's knotted here. So that depending on where we let this burn, nothing's going to fall apart.
Right.
And I could actually cut this in half.
Yeah.
Maybe with a little saw,
Yeah.
like a hacksaw, and give you half of it, and
Right.
it would all work fine.
It's not going to unravel.
But when I light the way, so it's all a bit moist, and it's packed real tight, and now that things have dried, it's got a bit of squeeze to it, but because it was packed moist, and you lay it somewhere flat to dry, if I light this at this end, this will burn all the way to the other end like a cigarette would.
Yeah.
I can light one of these and put it in. That mug would do.
Yeah.
And it would just burn there all day.
Yeah.
So depending on what kind of, we're doing a ceremony or something, it'll burn all day. Or, no, you use it for clients or cleanses or whatever. Then have just a coffee mug full of sand.
Yeah.
Just like they used to have in theaters when smoking
Right.
was allowed. And just wiggle it in some sand, because if you stick it in water, it's going to take 2 days to dry, right?
Yeah.
So, but I just wanted to emphasize that knotting often,
Yeah.
and you get a nice firm pack because it was moist,
Yeah.
and the string was moist. It's all moist, and it shrinks when it dries. And then you've got something that's easy to light, and it'll burn perfectly even. Otherwise, I watch some of these things people make, and it looks like what we used to call a bad joint.
Right. Yeah.
Where if it's not packed evenly, it'll burn up one side, and your pot falls all over the table or whatever.
We call that canoeing. Yeah. Some people are great boat builders.
So this, when you do it the way I do it, it burns perfectly even.
Yeah. 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 I've actually burned one of these before, and it's impressive. Yeah. In a huge amount of smoke. We had it outside, and it was just like, whew, we were smudging the neighborhood for sure.
Yeah. And it's certainly not hard to find.
No, that's right. Yeah. And I think one of the most common actually is the wormwood.
Well, that's what this is.
Right.
That's Frigida.
Frigida?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, there's another one. I think Denis calls it wormwood. I've heard you give it a different name. It ends up being more of like a big bush. It's not Ludoviciana. It's definitely not Frigida. I'll have to show you one of these days. Very common. Almost seems invasive. All over the place.
Well,
Big fluffy bush, and then it puts out its flowering stalks.
I mean, to some extent, the whole genus
Right, is
wormwood.
wormwood. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the trouble with common names.
They're
right?
all good for parasites.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So yeah, he would. I'm not sure if that's true. He would describe it with the Latin name Artemisia absinthium.
Well, that's the one we make absinthe from.
Yeah, yeah,
We did that. We did that on one of the episodes.
yeah,
It almost smells a bit like licorice when you
Right.
crush the leaves.
yeah.
We did that sitting in the park,
Right.
about 10 feet from the car.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Cool. That's a good one.
yeah, absinthium.
But like you say, 28 or so different varieties of them that grow in here in Alberta.
No, we were going to, we got off on some other topics, but something that I used to do with my class, this is the time of year when the sap's flowing and the buds are just opening on the white aspen trees.
Yeah.
Some city people just don't know. You never take bark strips all around a tree, or you're going to kill it. If you want to sacrifice a branch, you may as well just cut it off the tree, because it's going to die anyway. But if you've had the luxury of just being able to sit still in the woods one day, and watch something like a deer or an elk, in the wintertime when they don't have leaves, they bark.
Yeah.
And they'll walk up to a tree and bend down and bite into the bark, and then they just snap their head up and they tear about a 2-foot strip.
Yeah.
And they'll start chewing it, and kind of take a couple of steps, and they're chewing this bark, and by the time they finish that, they might step over there, and then they bite into another tree and
Yeah.
tear a strip off. So when I'm harvesting aspen bark, that's what I like to do too.
Yeah.
And I had one old kitchen knife that had a fairly broad blade and a big stout wooden handle, and it doesn't need to be all that sharp even. And so I'm going to do the same thing, but the other way around, and walk up to an aspen tree and kind of wiggle the blade in, and then pull the blade down and take about a 2-foot strip off.
Yeah, and how deep do you go in when you're wiggling that blade in?
Well, I'm taking the whole bark.
Right, yeah.
So I'm going in, if it's a big mature tree, I don't know, is that 3/8 of an inch maybe?
Yeah,
But until you hit the wood.
right.
And then just adjust your blade angle to get down. And at this time of year, it's easy to separate the two layers
Right, the inner and the outer bark.
because you get one of the things that we want from that bark is berberin, which is really, really bitter, and that's what's in golden seal.
Okay.
So this talk, which I've brought up before, is that in eastern Canada, golden seal grew freely in mixed dappled light forests.
Mm-hmm.
Where here, it never grew because we had the wrong conditions. It'll grow here if you want to plant it with shade cloth.
Right.
But here, any of the recipes that called for golden seal, any of the old indigenous recipes, the same recipes were done here with aspen bark.
Right, very cool.
So when we get the bark apart, you want to dry it and
clarify with that inner bark, right? Is with those, you separate the two, and then you take the inner bark and you dry that. Or is the outer bark good too? I know
Well-
the inner bark was also used as a food source, you know, when needed.
yeah, and it's one of those a bit iffy because I've tried it. Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
So that's the cambium, I think it's called.
Yeah.
It looks like cork.
Right.
So when we're using it for golden seal, we want the bitter stuff
Right, for sure.
because that's where the action is. But those will peel apart, and you get the corky stuff is what you could grind into porridge.
Right.
And the other bark is what I want to poke holes in. And like I said, you could just have a piece of string or whatever, depending on how big your holes are that you're drilling. And for some strange reason, it's probably just something I saw in a book. I don't know, just rope sounds easier. But I used to take a couple of the wire coat hangers
Yeah.
and just use vice grips to cut one end open
Yeah.
and sort of make a little hook there. And you could just hang them about 1/2 inch apart
Yeah, that sounds pretty
and hang them up on a rope. Well, why not? I don't know. Anyway, I've done it that way
Yeah.
on
cool.
coat hangers. And then using a pair of pruners, cut those sticks about 3/4 of an inch or so. And I found that at that length, I wasn't concerned about hurting the blades on my Vitamix.
Right, okay, yeah.
On some cheap blender, you'd probably wreck the blades.
Yeah.
But the Vitamix handled those just fine
Yeah.
to grind it.
Great.
And the same goes for the other part to grind it into porridge. But I still found even getting getting that, well, the white part, if you can get all the green off, is what we use for a demulcent,
Okay.
rather like slippery elm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, interesting.
But you want every little bit of green off. And for that, I used to use, before I was cutting them, so when the strips are so long,
Yeah.
I would use a wood rasp
Okay.
to get every little bit of green off.
Yeah.
And then cut them into chunks
Yeah.
and Vitamix. Terry had a grinder that we used to use from the farm that I used to grind reishi with, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was just doing little jobs on my own.
Right.
And right, but for quite a while there, if I was doing, yes, because that thing was heavy, I carried it around. Yes, I used to bring that grinder from the farm to my house when I was doing that class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I
So
think we should do a field trip. I think we should, go out to a little Aspen stand and
have at it.
have at it.
Well, this is the time.
Yeah.
Because when I did that class,
We've got another 5 minutes on the power here.
okay. When we did that class, the way it worked was, it was the, whatever we called it. But the first day of the class, I was doing map and compass work. I don't want to say orienteering, because that's actually a sport.
Right.
But anyway, orienteering. We would do all the map and compass stuff. And then we would go out to the woods on the Sunday. And I'd give them a map, and we were overlooking where the Ghost River and the South Coast River joined.
Okay.
We were up on that hillside, and I would have them all sit about 10 feet apart so they couldn't cheat. And I said, okay, here you go. You got your compasses. There's a couple of mountain peaks that you can triangulate with. I want you to put a spot on this map as close as you think you are with your pen.
Right.
And we'll compare notes. So everybody have at it.
Yeah.
And that's what they would do before lunch.
Oh, that would have been fun.
And man, some people there clearly weren't listening yesterday.
Yeah.
Because there were such obvious clues.
Right.
Like the convergence of the two rivers,
Right.
a couple of mountaintops that you could
Yeah.
shoot angles at, and you should be able to get it. Like there was one gal that probably had her spot within 10 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, she won the prize.
Yeah.
So then in the afternoon, we would work our way down the hillside. I had some people stripping aspen and other groups picking the juniper berries.
Right.
Because there was lots of juniper all the way down. So are we short of time now?
We're like 2 or 3 minutes left on the...
Okay, so the two most common junipers in our area are horizontalis, which grows in big mats on the ground, but sometimes where they've come along and dug away at a hillside to put a road in, or you had a high river flood where a new rapid was created and a hillside was undercut, and what used to be a meadow up here is now gone, you get Juniperus horizontalis hanging vertically.
Right.
And so there was, and I mean, I have my walking stick that I have with the crystal on it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
actually juniper.
Right. Oh, wow.
It's about this thick.
Wow.
That's about a 200-year-old juniper branch.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so we used it on one trip when we were kayaking. We got into a gorge, and because we weren't paying attention to the map, and we were stuck in this gorge, and we'd have to go, well, anyway, it was a bad thing. And I kind of looked around and went, well, that's horizontalis. That's going to be strong. So anyway, the lightest guy there, who was a bit of a climber anyway, took some rope and scampered up this 20-foot cliff using the juniper,
Oh, hey.
carrying ropes with him.
Yeah.
So he got up there with the juniper,
Right.
and then threw ropes over so we could hitch
Right.
up the rest of the people and
Yeah.
the kayaks to get up there so that we could portage this gorge.
No way.
So that was the day that I used Juniperus horizontalis as verticalis. But because it's these big mats that you can actually just lift and tear up, what a nice thing if you've been using your teepee or tent for a while, and it's just, you killed all the grass that was there, and now you're on dirty knees and whatnot.
Right.
You can put a mat there,
Yeah.
and every time you come and go, you're crushing. It's like, wow, all of the essential oils are coming out, which is sanitizing your tent.
Yeah.
Or why not even, if you're going to be preparing tinctures and things, let's do that and put them in front of the tables
Right.
that we're using, so that we're sanitizing the air where it's like a commercial kitchen now. We've
Cool.
cleaned up the air, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So junipers are another one that you could do a whole book on, coast to coast, different indigenous uses.
Yeah.
But mostly we use it as a diuretic.
Right.
And so back to this UTI blend that we were making,
Yeah.
we used the aspen bark, the juniper berries, and then Arctostaphylos uva ursi, aka bearberry, which is the one that covers mats. It
Right.
covers the whole from the foothills
Oh, yeah.
to the west coast.
Yeah.
The forest is just, if it's not covered with sphagnum moss, it's covered with uva ursi, right?
Yeah.
And a couple things on that one. If you boil it up, it's so high in tannins that if you boil it up, and I mean, you can go to the foothills and fill a truck with this stuff. Nobody's going to carry this everywhere. So I, on one trip, I was going in to join some friends where they were doing a guy's getaway to a fly-in. A guy got his license to, he would own this lake, or lease it.
Right.
He would have his private lake, and he got a group of guys together to go in and build a cabin. And the group was, or the deal was that anybody that was part of that group could book their holidays there in the future.
Right.
Right? So, anyway, cook up a bunch of bearberry, it's called, uva ursi. Cook it up until it's nice and dark. And you can tan your own living hide. I wasn't doing much with my hands at the time that this trip came up.
Yeah.
And you're watching a movie, soak your hand. And I used to, you might remember, I used to live barefoot.
Oh, totally.
So in the spring, sometimes I would do this, just watching a movie, soak your feet for a while, let them dry on a towel, soak your feet again some more. And you could tan your hide so that first paddling of the year,
Right.
no blisters,
Yeah.
or for me running around barefoot,
Yeah.
you could almost walk on rose bushes, you know?
Right.
But we use it, it has a chemical called arbutin that when you drink the decoction, it gets into the kidney tissue, and right there in the kidney, it's split in half, and half of it is a very powerful antibiotic. The herb isn't by itself on the ground. It's not like tea tree oil, or you can't crush it up and put it on an infected wound. But when you drink the decoction, it becomes an antibiotic right in the kidney
Yeah.
and treats everything downstream. So what a perfect thing for a bladder infection.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Powerful antibiotic, and you make it on site. We might have covered that in another episode.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. A nice formula with
But,
the juniper, the aspen bark, which can be used in that way, but then also, as you mentioned, almost like a replacement change out for golden seal,
As well as demulcent.
as well as demulcent. Cool. All right. Well,
So there it is.
Yeah.
Is that it? We're done?
yeah, we're just over an hour. We've got about, couple percent left on the camera. So we'll say that's all for now. And join us again in a couple weeks. And stay tuned. We are going to have some outings coming up through the spring, the summer. We can get out. Yeah, maybe we'll do a sage class. Maybe we'll do...
I had at least 50 of these in my house that somebody got.
Yeah, I got a number of them.
Yeah? Okay, good. Glad to hear.
Yeah, and subsequently they have gone out.
And we solved a mystery.
Yeah, that's right. The tarragon vinegar. Cool. Well, we covered a lot of ground.
And I'm still tasting that.
Oh, you are, hey? Yeah.
I had half a teaspoon.
Mm-hmm.
And my mouth's still a little tart, so I know that would be really good with some goat cheese and some decent oil.
Nice. All right.
Freshly ground black pepper.
We'll pour you a bottle.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks.
We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to give us a like, share this with someone you know who would benefit, and subscribe so you're up to date with all the new episodes coming out. You can shop online at lightseller.ca as well as visit us in the heart of Bowness in Calgary, Alberta.